How does it work?
Why do you want to know?
I wish to know all the secrets of existence.
Don't we all?
But first...
Pull to open.
Pull to open!
Yes, and what do you do?
It's a very flat team structure. We all have our area of expertise.
We should talk.
Want to come with us? Not really.
It's a long, sad story.
I've got time. Tell me.
Here come the drums!
So here it comes, the sound of drums. Here come the drums, here come the drums.
Hello and welcome to Pull to Open, where we have the very muffled sound of drums. This is a Doctor Who podcast, in case you didn't know, and we are the only Doctor Who podcast out there listening and watching the show in very, very random order. My name's Chris Taylor.
And I'm Pete Paschal, and yeah, Chris and I are a couple of guys, a couple of journalists, a couple of Doctor Who obsessives who have been obsessing about the show and nerding out about it for most of our lives. We figured, why not share that nerdiness with an audience that'll really appreciate it, which is not the other people in our lives, but you folks, you the fan,
you dear listener,
Yes.
you know who you are. You Pull to Open fans, and many of you will know where we've been previously on Pull to Open. 4 episodes ago, we were at our first Sylvester McCoy story, Battlefield, which has interesting connections to where we're at today, not least of which because it reminded us of Monty Python. 3 episodes ago, we were also back in Old Who with the 2 Doctors, a Colin Baker, Patrick Troughton joint, and we learned all about why vegetarianism is cool. 2 episodes ago, we were on Tom Baker's only Cyberman story, Revenge of the Cybermen, and we saw why it was Tom Baker's only Cyberman story. And then last week, the randomizer heard our prayers, our desire to return to New Who, and it took us to the Jodie Whittaker episode, Rosa. And now, here we are, stuck in the new show series, specifically stuck in new show series 11. We've moved from episode 3 to episode 8. We have gone from the historical or pseudo-historical Rosa to the historical or pseudo-historical Witchfinders.
Well, wow. Let me first get a little bit of if I could do a clap emoji somewhere here in the Zencaster, I would. That was a very great summary.
Thank you.
Of where we've been lately and sort of our emotional journey.
Yeah.
It's praying to be back in New Who. And boy, did it answer us in a big way. I mean, we're not like it rocketed us forward to the most recent era. Of Doctor Who, which obviously is very apt because we're just weeks away now from the centenary special.
We are. And yeah, it's sort of almost a gift that we've been asked by the randomizer to give the Whittaker era a closer look and almost a rewatch, right? Because it's, I don't know about you, Pete. I hadn't really rewatched a lot of the 13th Doctor's stuff.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah.
This is the first time I've rewatched either of these episodes, Rosa and the Witchfinders. And
I feel like it's giving us good ones to rewatch while sort of leaving Demons of the Punjab, which I think is easily the best episode of that season of Series 11. But still giving us a couple of really good historicals and definitely focusing on the setting in the past more than the future, Earth more than space. The randomizer has preferences. And do you know what, Pete? It also answered our question. You know what? Remember a couple of weeks ago, we I think within our feedback loop, within our news, we were talking about King Charles III,
right,
as he now is, and we were asking our listeners, if there's any story that has King Charles in it. Like, we sort of mentioned, like, he's briefly shown in The Idiot's Lantern. He's probably on the palace balcony during the coronation.
Right.
He, sort of tangentially mentioned in a few other situations this Battlefield that had mention of the king. Another interesting reason for the randomizer to take us there. However, we said, are there any others? Are there any other Charles references? Now, the randomizer didn't answer us directly because it couldn't, because I don't think it can. I don't think there are any. but it did take us to the only Doctor Who episode to feature a King of England
Oh.
in a speaking role. I think I'm right? Because King's Demons, we've been there. That was not actually King John, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
It was Chameleon the robot. And I just went through the codex the other night, kind of trying to look for examples of kingly appearances in Doctor Who. I don't think there are any others.
It's true. It's been more Queen obsessed.
Exactly. We've had Elizabeth I many times.
Yes.
But no kings. So
true.
this is literally the closest that it could possibly take us to a King Charles III episode. Because, of course, James, his son, King James, was King Charles I. So there is sort of a connection here.
Yeah.
And once again, I'm scared of the randomizer.
Yeah, I kind of like Doctor Who's casting of kings a little better than maybe the real world, but
yes,
no,
give us King Alan the First.
I was trying to go through the time space visualizer in my head as you were talking about early, depictions of royalty, and I actually went back to the time space visualizer in my mind into the Jace, where they peek in, and I thought for a second, was there a king? No, it was Elizabeth I, because it was like Shakespeare was in her court, and there was some little back and forth there. So no kings there either.
No kings in Doctor Who except for Alan Cumming, and we will get to him. But first, we have what we call our feedback loop. Pete, what's the feedback loop?
The feedback loop is where we dive into Pull to Open, the podcast, and how it's interacting with the real world, such as the internet is, because we are on the internet.
So
but
real.
People review the podcast, they leave us comments, and we like to talk about the highlights of that in this part. And we're going to lead off with reviews, as we always do. And this time with reviews, which, by the way, you should leave. Little reviews are great. We love them. We love to read them out on the air, and they really help the podcast with their visibility in the Apple Podcast app. So even if you don't use that app, please go ahead and fire it up and leave us a review. Also, wherever you're listening to this, if you are able to rate or review the show, please do so. Again, really helps the app. It probably does help the app, but it also helps the podcast.
Yeah. It helps the app to be used every so often. It's like stretching a muscle. You gotta do it.
Your podcast app wants to feel wanted.
Exactly.
So what I have here, though, is a bit of a correction on our last review. So we read out one of our most recent review, which had a very clever title of A Blue Box.
Yes.
But I really tripped over the handle, and I think I said it was Dajozen1. And that's the best I did. If I just sort of thought about it for a little longer, I would have realized it's the chosen one.
Yes.
As in the chosen one. And I want to thank Joe Cyberpunk Rep for setting us straight.
Yes, I love it. If we'd been, better Star Wars fans and not thinking in a Doctor Who fan context, maybe we would have gotten that one.
I know. I don't even know if I have any Star Wars Easter eggs in my background today, but thanks so much again for that great review. It was a really good one, and you too could get your handle corrected on air.
That's right. You can even mention 2 weeks in a row.
Leave a good review with the perplexing handle, and we'll be glad to give you a 1-2 punch. So thanks again, Joe, and go ahead and follow him if you find that on the socials as well. After you follow, of course. Pull to Open wherever we are available. TikTok, Pull to Open, Twitter and Instagram, Pull to Open 63, and YouTube.com/Pull to Open. We're on all of it.
I have to say, before we leave that Josen one and the blue box emoji, this reminds me that RTD himself has been using emoji as sort of Doctor Who hint. Fact. So the Doctor Who emoji thing is so hot. It's so hot right now. He previewed the announcement of Ncuti Gatwa as the 14th Doctor with a tweet that was just, I believe it was 2 heart emojis, a plus sign, and a blue box.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I sort of vaguely remember this. But has he been up to anything lately?
There were other mentions. There was one similar one that sort of preceded the announcement of Tennant and Donna. Their return. That was also a two-heart. So anyway, all I'm saying is clearly RTD listens to the show. Clearly he's gotten the idea that Doctor Who emoji is the way to go.
Well,
so
I
it's
would
really
add
hard.
that he clearly should have written smile.
He knows emoji. Yeah.
If they only they had someone who knew emoji actually writing that episode, I think it would have been a classic.
He speaks emoji.
Speaking of RTD, this is kind of the other business section of things, but he did share something out on Instagram recently and clearly gotten to work even before. I don't think they're shooting the next season yet. I think that's in a couple of months. I think November. But they tweeted out a photo of himself and Ncuti Gatwa and other creative folks, who I should know, obviously working on the show, but they're obviously hard at work on the next season. What is that? 12, 13? No, 14, I guess. Right?
Well,
because Flux was technically the series 13.
13, yes.
Yeah, okay.
So 14 will be the next one.
Wow. Apt.
Indeed. The number of seasons, the number of Doctors have finally lined up. Not sure if that's happened before.
Yeah. Crazy. We'll see. We'll see when they get to season 275.
Oh, we will get there. We'll still be on air going through random episodes of Doctor Who, probably.
Absolutely. I'm committed.
We did figure out last time that this was going to take us, 8 years?
Something like that. But as long as some mud reanimates me billions of years later, I am down. So
That's
Morax, people, if you're listening, I will break you guys out of prison to just keep this podcast going.
Oh my
God.
God.
Getting ahead of myself, though.
We will so chop down the tree to let
sure.
our Morax brothers and sisters out. Morax. The Morax, they speak for the mud.
So I went over the other socials. Just a reminder, YouTube, we are still uploading season 2 of the podcast. So we have just gotten all the way up to Terror of the Autons. That was a good one.
I remember it well. It's about a year ago,
Yeah, good times. I don't think we ever really figured out why the Nestines are octopi in the Pertwee era, but go with it.
It's funny. I think daffodils. Every time I think of Terror of the Autons now, I just think daffodils.
Totally. And creepy.
Yeah, it's this sort of happy, joyous celebration of flowers in my memory. Perhaps where best to leave it.
Okay, and TikTok, of course, we are on TikTok at Pull to Open. We're getting more followers, more comments, and we have a TikTok comment of the week. And this is on one of our Revenge of the Cybermen videos. It was actually the plot summary, and it comes from someone with the handle Slats22. And Slats22 tells us, my first intro to Cybermen. Loved this episode. Really thought those little cyberbug venom things creepy as heck.
Wow.
And I wanted to just highlight this just to remind everyone, as much as you might hate on a particular episode, it has its fans. And we did find a lot to like about Revenge of the Cybermen. I mean, it sort of starts out strong and then completely collapses under the nonsenseness of its plot.
Yeah. But someone loves it.
Yeah, and it's again, like I say, not as bad as we thought, and I think it's completely okay to love that episode. If you love it,
absolutely, yeah. We're not here to tell you that you're wrong, that you're bad for loving a thing that you love. But also, I love that he calls the cybermat cyberbug venom things, which is wonderful. TikTok's a great platform, and I sort of feel like it's in its infancy. And one of the things it could do is link to other suggested TikToks that we point you to, because it would be great for us to go from a Cybermat TikTok from Revenge of the Cybermen to a Cybermat TikTok from, say, Closing Time.
Yeah.
Like, if you liked Cybermats, here's a TikTok for you to go to next.
And we do have one. There's a TikTok we did on Bitey from Closing Time.
Oh, I love Bitey.
All-time best gold medalist in the Cybermat contest, I believe. Bitey was just so great.
There are no gods but Bitey. No Cybermats but Bitey.
We got to have him on the pod sometime. thank-
via Zoom, right, in his own window. So he's just sort of smashing against the screen for the whole podcast.
Yeah, I think it'd be hard to get him close to the mic, and I might feel a little uneasy about that if he was here in the room.
Yeah, Bitey, we can't hear you, Bitey. You've eaten your mic. Swallow it, give it, yeah. Regurgitate it, Bitey. Come on.
So thanks, Slats22, for reminding us there's good things, and even what we consider might be the turkeys of Doctor Who.
That's right. Turkey is tasty.
Turkey's delicious, man. I'm looking forward to having tons of it this fall.
Probably the next time we're at New Who. So that's it.
Yeah, closing the book on the feedback loop there, and we're getting to other business, which I think we've pretty much covered. The centenary specials coming up, but one thing we did mention was the Doctor Who magazine revealed the title. That's been out for a while. I've actually finally got my hard copy, which took a while to get me, and for the YouTube people on YouTube.
Yeah, Sacha Dhawan.
That's Sacha Dhawan, and I've there's a lot of interviews in here, and I did just get it, so I've only read one of them, but they share a lot about sort of the epicness, as you would expect, of the centenary special, allude to certain things that are happening, and they have interviews with everybody from Janet Fielding to, everyone we know about, right? So Janet Fielding, Sophie Aldred, Sean O'Kane, who's back as Ash, and I wanted to just flip again for you guys on YouTube. This is what I'm really looking forward to, and I'm on record as one of the first pull to opens as really liking this design. It's the Cybermasters. They're back, as we kind of knew, but they got a whole freaking spread here in the magazine. That
I did not know that. I did not know that they were back. I'm excited that they're back. It's a great design. It's one of the things that we mentioned when we did the Timeless Children back before we went random back in our first season, and it was definitely a standout from that episode, from that season. The design of the Cybermasters, it made the ridiculous concept that the Master could wipe out the entire Time Lord race kind of makes a bit more. Well, it doesn't make sense, but produces a reason. The Cybermasters are cool.
Not to get too far down previewing or reviewing a show we know virtually nothing about, but what I would love, I really like the Cybermasters, not just as a design, but kind of an idea. And I kind of do want to see them without the Master, though, because if they're just kind of like cyber slaves of the Master, that's not that interesting. But if you see Cybermen enhanced with the power and sort of knowledge of the Time Lords, essentially cyber Time Lords, I like that idea of them as a primary bad guy.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, a Cyber Lord President would be fantastic. And I also kind of love the idea. You're taking me into interesting headcanon territory, which is like, what if they were like Oswald in Asylum of the Daleks? They didn't know they were Cybermen. They thought they were just Time Lords kind of continuing on.
Right. Or like Bill, even. There's some precedent for that, right? With the Cybermen.
Exactly. Bill, an even better example in the Dr. Falls. Bill is a Cyberman.
Yeah, I like that. And they're this kind of like, somehow the cyberizing of them gives them almost like, it's almost like, this is the thing. The Cybermen have, I shouldn't go too far down. This is a tangent, but they're sometimes like zombies.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're like vampires, if you think about it, right? And so sort of, you can play out both of those things in an episode like that, and I just I really think there's a lot of ripe stuff to be mined by finding this cyberized versions of other things, and not just sort of this human plus technology thing, which is interesting. I like the Cybermen. Don't get me wrong. It's just like, let's keep experimenting. Let's keep trying new things.
I love it because it sort of it sends a shiver down my spine at the idea of the Cybermen not knowing that they're Cybermen, and it's we do love, if you're new to Pull to Open, the Pull to Open universe, we do love our headcanon here on this show. We do love to take a tangent into what might have been and what might yet be. So definitely not out of character for us at all. However, we are going to close the book.
Are we?
On the feedback loop.
Must we?
Well,
the feedback
because it is that time.
It's time.
It's that time. It's the time that Peter's procrastinating on, because he has to summarize the episode that we're talking about, the Witchfinders,
right?
In a segment we call TLDW. Too long didn't watch, or too long Doctor Who, you choose. And what we do with these is we give you 30 seconds per classic episode, 1 minute per new episode to summarize the show with no notes open on your screen.
Right. Yep, they're all
On
gone.
YouTube, you can see, yes, Pete's face grows slightly darker as the deadline looms.
Windows disappear as I
Windows
do hide
disappear.
others from the Finder, and even the Zencaster is no longer visible.
Yes, it's not that we have dramatic lighting here on Pull to Open. It is just merely the closing of the windows.
Someday.
So Pete, how are you feeling about summarizing the Witchfinders in 1 minute?
I'll be honest with you, not great. I mean, as you sort of demonstrated even in Rosa, which was even, I think, more straightforward, these New Who ones are hard because there is a pacing difference between the classic series and the new series, and the new series just sort of inherently crams more in, I believe. So there's that, and this one is like there's a lot of kind of back and forth in this one. I feel like more than it seems. So
there's a lot of plot. There's a lot of plot in New
Who. A lot of plot.
This is what we're discovering. Our muscles are out of practice. Our plot summarizing muscles have become used to the high oxygen environment of classic Who, and now here we are taking them to the altitude training.
Yeah. So I'll do my best here. Obviously, it's in TLDW. It's always a question of what you leave out, what you prioritize. So it's not it inherently can't be comprehensive. So I'll try to be really selective and not go down any rabbit holes. And that's the best you can do, man.
Good luck with the mud and the tentacles bubbling up out of those rabbit holes. Don't get trapped by the tentacles. All right. The official Pull to Open summary in the Witchfinders. I'll take that again. The official Pull to Open summary of the Witchfinders starts in 3, 2, 1, go.
The Doctor and the fam are going back or trying to go back to see Elizabeth I, but they keep missing, and they actually end up pretty close in the early 17th century in Lancashire, and there is a witch trial going on. The Doctor says don't interfere, but then she loses that resolve on seeing the person being drowned. They get drowned. The Doctor pretends that she is actually a witchfinder general to the local person, who's this woman named Becca Savage, who has actually been executing a lot of women because they're witches. And so she tries to stop her in any way she can. A plot twist, King James actually shows up because he's been hearing about the heroism of this woman executing witches in the name of defeating Satan. And so the Doctor and the fam really try to find out what's going on. Yaz finds out that there is this weird mud stuff that's actually reanimating corpses. The Doctor realizes there are these creatures, the Morax, that come out of this prison and then somehow stops them from breaking out of that prison. But the king actually kills this Becca Savage person who's been taken over by the Morax. And it's sad, but they have defeated the Morax and re-imprisoned them. And the Doctor gets King James, or at least tries to persuade him to stop killing witches, and they all leave.
Yes, well, okay.
Past time.
1 minute and 22 seconds.
There's too much to explain here.
There is too much.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
I don't know where I would have. I mean, I kind of know. Like, I probably should have practiced it or something, because it's like I left out a lot, even going a minute 20.
That's okay. It's okay. It's not. This is not a reality show where you'll be ejected from the podcast for going over time. That's later in the Pull to Open development, when this turns into a really nasty podcast. But no, you will.
It's the Inferno World podcast. Pull to Open.
Yeah. If I wear a fake mustache, like a tune in one of the week, I've got a fake
some
mustache.
leather eye patches.
Watch
order
out.
those off Amazon.
Yeah, I'll just sort of swing around in my chair and I'll be leather eye patch. We've all got one.
What are you doing in that get-up, Chris? Okay.
I love it. But no, it's a really tough one, and I'm sorry you had to handle this. There is a lot going on. You do sort of have to bring King James into it, which King James was apparently a late addition to the story. The story which is ironic because the story was originally called Demonology, which is the name of the book that King James I wrote about witchcraft. That is glimpsed briefly on the table of Becca Savage in their show. But
he did a lot of writing, that King James.
He really did. My God, he wrote 3 books. He did not write, obviously, the translation of the Bible that bears his
Right.
name, but he did do 2 other ones.
Were the
Basically,
Bibles?
well, not quite that length, but yeah, he did do demonology because he was
Right.
actually Witchfinders is historically accurate in a lot of ways, and one of the ways is he was obsessed with witches. And then the other ones, he kind of was obsessed with the divine right of kings,
Okay.
which would cause his son King Charles so much trouble and would cause him to eventually lose his head. This philosophy of the divine right of kings, and then the other one is a book written to the son that he thought was going to be king. I
Interesting.
believe his name was Frederick, who died, and King Charles I became king because his elder brother died before King James I died. So imagine being poor Charles I, and your dad has written this entire book to your dead brother on how to be a king, and like there you are, like doing the line from Walk Hard, if you remember that film, the wrong son died. So fascinating for a lot of reasons. Obviously, the existence of King James in this sort of kind of throws a lot of spanners in the works, and the first spanner is named Alan Cumming because if you're watching The Witchfinder and you're like, hang on, didn't this used to have more scenes? Well, the answer is that Alan Cumming stole them. He walked away with them. Other ones, like there's less scenery than you might imagine because he chewed it. What did you think?
Well,
what did you think seeing it again?
I thought it was good. It was really good. And I think it's already interesting, and you're getting a lot of visceral reaction from the Doctor and the fam encountering sort of this ugliness of history, sort of similar in that sense to Rosa, but
Yeah,
sort of different in some key ways, just sort of from the historical thematic sense. But really, like, you're already into it. Alan Cumming shows up and everything gets leveled up. Like, you're just like, oh wow, like he's kind of blowing me away with his lines and his performance. And I found that, like, as much as I enjoyed him, I almost felt bad for Jodie Whittaker.
Yes,
because she's kind of getting shown up in her own show. Now, that said, I think her role in this one, and we'll get into it, is written very well. In that she's always sort of moving things along and seemingly in control, except for a couple of key spots. But there's sort of room for the script to sort of make its points about sort of prejudice and particularly sexism through her, without her losing agency, and also her sort of retaining her sort of commanding status as the Doctor. So it sort of threads a needle here, like it's got a lot to do, and it pulls off most of it pretty well.
It gives the guest star space to shine, and it gives Jodie and Alan a great scene together where he has captured her. He's just sort of like now completely convinced that the Doctor is a witch. And they have this great line, these great lines together, these great scenes, all about this question of like, well, basically she knows everything that's happened to him because one thing we know about the Doctor, I wouldn't say he or she is a royalist, but they are definitely kind of most very, very interested in the details.
They know their British history.
They do.
No question.
Isn't that interesting?
Kind of reminds me a little bit of Davison and when
he was
the King's Demons. The King's Demons, and making sure Tegan was was up to speed.
Making sure damn Colonial knew her British history.
But it's but yeah, generally I think the Witchfinders is good. I think plot wise, it's actually okay. I guess when the Morax show up, and particularly when Becca Savage is taken over by them, I feel like there's a kind of a downgrade in the villainy of the episode, because the villainy is, I think, very good when it's that historical ignorance, the witch trials, and sort of like you understand it, but obviously you hate it and disgust it, and we're feeling what the fam is feeling, knowing that they can only do so much and can only correct so much by without going to war with these people, essentially, right? But the when they become the Morax and it's kind of just another alien of the week, that just sort of inherently becomes a little less interesting. And I know it's a Doctor Who show and you kind of expect that, But it's kind of like they're there to sort of layer on the creepy stuff with the zombies earlier, which
Yeah.
works, right? That's creepy as hell. My daughter, who watched this with me, she had a hard time going to sleep that night. So I've
Oh yeah, I
also
can
got
believe it.
Parent of the Year award after this one, by the way.
those mud creatures, they're pretty terrifying. Like the shade of gray
Yeah.
on their skin. There's just something about that.
Well,
It's super
especially
creepy.
the lead one, who is I forget the name of the character, but she's drowned in like the first time, the first person who gets drowned.
Old Mother Twiston, yes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
she got her makeup and everything is perfect. Like she is super creepy. Like you do not want to be anywhere near her. The other ones, like when they get the other corpses, I think they were just rushed. They were just like we can't do the full on thing for all 6 of them, and the other ones clearly look like they're just dimly lit in a music video.
But it's beautifully shot. We should definitely give a shout out to
Sure.
the director on this. Which, by the way, I believe first Doctor Who story ever to be written and directed by women.
Yep.
And the direction on this is great. It's very horror movie. It's very sort of low angles on the mud zombies, right? Make them look way creepier than they are. There's that great scene where we pull back to reveal that there's tons of them have all escaped from their graves, right? After we've just dealt with one. Which is, it's M. Night Shyamalan worthy esque kind of, just in visually speaking, right?
Yeah. I will get my
worthy of the
criticism
movie.
in here, though, that I've said before about things. They don't do enough. And they do some things, like they kill, I forget the king, again, I should I should probably try to prepare for this, but the king's protector gets killed by one of them with sort of this force shock, which again I think is kind of a bad choice. I mean, I get that this isn't a horror movie; it is Doctor Who, right? So there's a limit to the gruesomeness.
Yes,
but you can at least allude to it. You don't have to show the gore, but I would have preferred a little more visceral danger from the zombies, because at some point I'm kind of thinking, are they going to do anything? What are they going to do? And I kind of wanted, there was a missed opportunity here to have a little bit of Night of the Living Dead vibes. Like these things are really threatening us, and we're in visceral physical danger, which you never quite feel once they show up.
Yeah. You either go that way. I think you're right. You either go that way, or you go into pure historical. Now we were talking about this last week about with Rosa, like the racist dude from the future, Krasko, who instigates the attempt to stop Rosa doing her protest. Is kind of a fig leaf for sure. An almost pure historical. Now, if you're only familiar with New Who, you may not know from the old show there were pure historical episodes right up until the Patrick Troughton era. There was a lot in William Hartnell's era. It was very much a thing that was part of the remit of the show was education. So you had a lot of shows like the Reign of Terror, or episodes like the Reign of Terror, or the Massacre, and stuff like this, where it was just a historical event that the Doctor was going to, or indeed an unearthly child technically counts, right?
Yeah.
So it's built in right from the start, and they stopped it officially with the Highlanders. Black Orchid in the Peter Davidson era is technically pure historical. And it's like the new show has sort of been flirting with the idea, but it's like at the last minute they pull back, like, no, we've got to have something future-y, something monster-y. And it's basically, the randomizer has shown us 2 examples, like the Rosa is the something future-y, and and the Witchfinders has the Morax, something monster-y. Now, my problem with the Morax is, I'm a word guy, so it's going to be mainly about the name. The fact that the only thing we know about these mud zombies so far is 1, they're covered in mud, and 2, they carry an axe. Like, that's their defining feature. They like to pick up axes, even the axes that the fam has stupidly left lying around in the house. In Becca Savage's house, they're like, oh, she keeps an axe under her bed. That's interesting. Oh, look, the mud creatures grabbed the axe. We probably should have had that. But
we should have gone to that guy, yeah.
So first of all, so you're thinking about these creatures, right? In a shorthand, you're thinking the word axe, and then they show up, and then they reveal that their name is Morax, not less axe, more axe. but
Yeah,
also
it's,
it
it's
sounds
actually it's almost MOAR, isn't it? Like I think it's almost actually spelled that. I mean, I guess the A is on the other side. But
Morax, more. But also it sounds just like Lorax, and maybe this is just an American thing. I don't think Dr. Seuss wasn't as common in the UK, at least outside the Cat in the Hat. I don't remember the Lorax growing up, but certainly, to a US audience, this is like it's the Lorax but with mud. Like
yeah,
Lorax speaks for the trees, the Morax speaks for the mud.
it's definitely one of the lazier names. Honestly, one of the lazier aliens, and plot wise, I'll point out, just because it's like they do this thing again, almost needlessly making the scale absurd on the timeline, because they're like, well, this jail for the Morax has been there for billions of years, which is like billions, really, because that's like predating most life on Earth, and that's fine. I guess you could say that someone created a prison billions of years ago on some rock that just happened to turn into Earth. I guess that's the implication.
Yeah.
It is it's almost like you don't even want an explanation, right? Like it's sort of, you don't even want to think about it because it kind of ruins it. And it's all just twisting this plot into the witch trials of the 17th century. And, you could just say anything. You could just say like, well, because they would like to vacation here in Lancashire, like these it's like their hunting ground or whatever. It's like every now and then
Pendle Hill.
they gather some berries from Earth, and they decided, hey, this is a good spot for our prison.
It is interesting going back and forth with the new show and the old show. This is a problem the old show had as well, right? We ran into this with Revenge of the Cybermen, that the Vogan people on that asteroid called Voga were there for, like, they've been around. They said they've been around for billions of years themselves, right? And I think
something like that. I don't know.
Something like that. But I feel like we've had this conversation many times about Doctor Who villains, that they are almost always imprisoned for billions of years or millions. Like, why? Why do you need that time scale? It's kind of lazy writing. I think you're absolutely right. Especially as it's a lovely environmental metaphor that the reason the Morax were freed was that a tree was chopped down because Becca Savage was greedy and she didn't care about other people, and landowner, and
the most superficial of reasons too. It wasn't just like I need it to burn it for fuel. No, she just like, I don't like the trees. I'll look at the tree right now.
I don't want to look at that tree. So again, Lorax reference, like she's chopping a tree down, and that's when the tentacle comes out of the ground and chops her down, or at least infects her. Which is, I kind of like the infection aspect of it. Becca Savage sort of dripping mud out of her eyes. That's a nice, creepy scene. They're like, oh, okay, I'm starting to put this together.
And you kind of can figure out, like, from we've seen the zombies, like, that's what's going to happen to her. And so I think that, it works really well. It works as a very good plot device, just because it's like, oh, okay, she's not just killing people to sort of appease Satan, and accusing them of witchcraft. She's actually trying to hide her own infection.
It's
right.
That sense of, like, she's projecting her hatred, because it's happening to her. So speaking of things that happen in Doctor Who quite a lot, that I think are handled well in this one, is the Doctor's mention of meeting historical characters can often be, or sometimes being, historical characters. As we saw in Rosa, the Doctor basically says that she's Banksy, in this case, it's Houdini. Houdini makes a wonderful, I think, very well judged appearance in the script, where that is how the Doctor explains that she escapes the chains in the ducking chair because of, quote, a wet weekend with Houdini.
A wet weekend, okay.
A wet weekend. I love that, because it just,
Does that mean it's an open bar? I mean, like,
I mean, there's so many ways to interpret that, which is, I think, what is wonderful. Like, there's no, like, when Clara would talk about going and making out with Jane Austen, like, there were no two ways to interpret that, right?
Yeah.
But if you sort of make it ambivalent and ambiguous like this, like, the Doctor had a wet weekend with Houdini, what does that mean? Who knows? Make up your own headcanon.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And I think notably, it's I think at least the second mention of the Doctor meeting Houdini. There was a Pertwee episode
Ah.
where he frees himself from some rope or something, and he sort of for some reason can't remember the name of who taught him, and it was he utters out all these H names, and of course at the end it's Houdini.
So can I include one historical fact here that I love, and we'll maybe get to Chris's historical corner later because I have a lot to say about witch trials and
haven't
about
been there
ducking
already?
chairs.
I feel like we've been in the corner this whole time, but okay. All right.
We're corner adjacent. But since we're talking about the prison that is holding the Morax, Pendle Hill in Lancashire is a famous hill. Famous for a lot of reasons, actually, because we have so much history in Britain that it's just leaking with it. And the Pendle Hill witch trials are only one of like 3 reasons why Pendle Hill is famous. But my favorite fact about Pendle Hill is that the literal translation of Pendle Hill is hill, hill, hill.
Okay.
Because the word Pendle, it comes from pen, which meant hill in, I believe, Cumbrian, a very old language.
Yeah.
And then I think dull came from hill in Anglo-Saxon. And people just sort of ran them together and then forgot what both words mean. So they added a hill because it's clearly a hill.
Yeah.
So literally it's hill, hill, hill.
It says it like a hill. Gets a little flat. There's a hill on top of that, and then maybe there's an anthill on the second hill. So you got
it's like a warning to hikers: hill, hill, hill. Like this is a serious one.
Grade on this one is massive. Yeah, don't even bother getting your bike up there.
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah. So Pendle Hill, scene of real witch trials, or scene of an area where people were put on trial. They were not burned. They were not ducked. They were hanged.
Ouch.
9 women and 2 men, which is why, to the point of the show itself, like the show says that, 26 people have been killed here.
That's a lot. I think it might have been higher. It might have been like 30 something.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah.
Becca Savage has, she's killed or drowned 36 witches. And that's sort of why they have to do this thing at the end where they basically make it hidden history, right? We're going to completely abolish the town. What was it called? Slimehurst? It's not a nice name of town. Something Hurst Crag.
Crag? Yeah. I remember the word crag. It's Bilehurst.
Bilehurst, yes. Bilehurst Crag. Yes, that's a name you wouldn't necessarily want to have on the map, so it's interesting that the king kind of announced it. But it's also interesting that they're saying that this massive ducking of witches occurred completely outside of the historical record. Nobody noticed. Nobody wrote it down, because the actual Pendle Hill witch trials are some of the best, like we have the most documentary evidence for them of any witch trials anywhere.
Oh, interesting. I assume they all ended in execution, all the hangings and.
So there were
never survived a witch trial, like proven innocent.
Yes, I believe that some were.
Their innocence was like they died. So
Yeah. Well,
it's like the opposite of no harm, no foul. It's all harm, all foul.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, we'll get to the ducking stool later as a separate thing. Like, I'm glad that they included it because the ducking stool was almost more deadly than witch trials were.
Mm-hmm.
Witch trials, like they grab the headlines, as it were, in a historical sense. Obviously, we think of Salem. But how many people were killed at Salem? 20 were executed. 200 people accused, right? So it was only a 10% murder rate. And Salem, obviously, we remember as this horrible period in history. We think of the Crucible, and we think of the sense of accusation, the screaming back and forth, right? All of that. And still it only killed 20 people, right? And Pendle witches.
And here they're almost
only 12 died. Apparently around 500 executions for witchcraft between the early 15th and early 18th centuries. So basically the whole time that witchcraft was kind of a thing. In the UK, fewer than 500 executions.
Hmm.
So the Pendle witch trials were 2% of the total of witch executions, all over.
Well, you're
By the
talking
way,
historically, the 2% doesn't
yeah,
matter. It's just a slow percentage.
historically.
Because here there's like way more.
Yeah, it would be. This is what I'm saying. This is how huge this would be in a historical context.
Yeah.
And you'd think that Thomas Potts would have mentioned it. So Thomas
Right.
Potts is not, well, potentially Bill Potts' ancestor, but wrote a book called The Wonderful Discovery of Witches in the County of Lancaster.
Okay.
Which is the book that he was clerk to the court of these assizes that tried these witches. So he wrote literally everything down.
Wow.
So we have
And
so much detail.
Isn't the whole thing in this one that it's like erased though from the record, like at the end there? And so,
Well, yeah, that's the thing about the
Yeah.
Slimehurst Crag trials, right? Are sort of erased from the record, but Pendle Hill,
Yeah.
I guess, continues. I guess because the executions were diverted. One of them took place in York, and the other in Lancaster. The others were all Lancaster for legal reasons. But yeah, it's weird, and it does tie into James the First. It's the interesting thing because, so imagine you've got a mad king. I know this is hard for America to imagine.
Delightfully mad king.
A lightly mad king, but basically, imagine you've got a king who really believes witchcraft is a thing,
right?
Or witch hunts is a thing. Imagine a leader who keeps ranting about witch hunts. I know it's impossible for Americans to imagine that, but just try, just stretch your imaginations. Yeah,
I think I know what you're doing here.
You see what I'm doing here? Yeah, so King James was
not everything is about Trump, Chris. I'm just
isn't it though? Isn't it? It's sort of infected all portions of our brain. That's kind of the point. But yes, so King James, it is, and the show, The Witchfinders, does an excellent job of kind of explaining King James's history and why he has such PTSD around witches. Right? He's so anti-witch, and what is the reason? Well, it's that he's constantly in danger of assassination. It's absolutely true. And
I feel like that was like, I didn't quite buy it at first, especially on first watching, that he's kind of like the king, but he's kind of wandering around on his own, and that was always weird to me,
Yes.
But on second watching and sort of getting like more vibe from him and feeling like he's like, I travel incognito, so you buy into that level, and he's not totally alone, of course. And he
has Alfonso.
Yeah, he has that's it, Alfonso. Thank you. I couldn't have placed it before, but I thought it made more sense this time. And if you think about just even back then, the pomp and circumstance that we associated with the royalty today, was probably a nascent form, and you just didn't have massive processions wherever royals went. It was just kind of I mean, maybe they did like in some context, but I like this idea. He's a stealthy king.
You've definitely hit on something that bothered me too. Yeah. I think it's right. I think it's right to be confused about that, not only from a purely historical perspective, which is obviously the king would travel with a larger retinue. And you sort of have signs of a retinue in the background of some scenes. Yeah. You're sort of not sure whose retinue they are, right? But definitely, like, it just doesn't make sense internally for such a paranoid king to travel with such a small entourage. Like, well, with not an entourage, with one dude. And when he showed up in his mask, I don't know about you, but I got, since we've been there recently, Mark of the Rani vibes, where the master is sort of like trying to do this inept disguise, like, and everyone knows he's the master. Like, why would you even bother? Yeah, with King James, it doesn't seem right. I'm going to say that it's probably a function of his late emergence in the script. But yeah, it struck me throughout. Why is he alone?
It's one of these things where you either buy it or you don't. I think the first time it bothered me too much. This time I went with it because there is logic to it, right? Like, if you're actually really trying to avoid, and this is kind of what I was trying to get at earlier, where if you're really trying to avoid being seen or knowing where you are, you're essentially like, you're reducing your presence to this footprint that everyone would think that couldn't be the king, because he would travel with 100 guys. but he travels with only a few guys. So it's like, well, no one, like, no one's going to think. But of course, once he sort of unmasks himself literally, this is where this doesn't make sense anymore, because it's like, well, wait a minute. Now you're not saying like, I'm, Joe Blow witch guy. I'm like, I'm the king. Well, now that you've said that, everyone's going to know you're the king. Yeah. You should probably call in your entourage.
Yeah, it just like, I mean, it definitely in this time, Tudor monarchs, Stuart monarchs, they would all travel with entourages. They were all terrified of assassination, with very good reason. I mean, it is amazing that James survived as long as he did with the gunpowder plot, especially, we all know about Guy Fawkes. Ironically, because of the mask. But yeah, he was a super paranoid king. Totally would have traveled with an entourage. Doesn't make sense, even given what we know about him in the show. And the other interesting thing is, so love Alan Cumming, love him to death. In fact, I'm going to make an obscure Alan Cumming reference to prove this, which is that I love the show. If you can dig it out anywhere, you're a better internet searcher than I am. It's called The High Life. And it was a BBC sitcom from the mid-90s in which Alan Cumming plays a air steward on an airline that's going back and forth between London and Edinburgh. He's obviously, playing it in his home accent, his Scottish accent, which is, again, by the way, great reason to play James, who was originally a Scottish king. But once you choose Alan Cumming for this role, you kind of know what you're going to get, right? It's going to be a bit comedy. Because he is so good at that. He's just like a twinkle in his eye can make you laugh. That's just the astonishing acting chops of this guy. And if you stick him in a beard and a twirly mustache like that, you absolutely know what you're going to get comedy. So it's a comedy version of King James. Well, here's the thing. So we've seen it in the context of the Romans recently, right? We went to the Romans, the Hartnell historical.
Right, with
Nero, definitely played by a comedian, played for laughs, played as a comic thing. But also, at the same time here, like you're trying to do this deadly serious point where the Doctor is talking to James about his obsession with witches. And the Doctor's like trying to make a serious historical point. And we sort of feel for the Doctor because she is... for the first time, she's encountering the danger that a woman would face in this era, and she sort of, says it expressly, like, "Oh my God, if I was a bloke." At one point, she's like, "Oh, if I was a bloke, this wouldn't even be a problem." It's a revelation for her in her new body, so it's kind of got this serious cast to it, right? Because there's a lot of serious issues to be dealt at here, and. Well, can a primarily comedy role pull that off?
I think he does. I really liked the way Alan Cumming plays it, because it's not played consistently for laughs throughout. And I think the moment, it's actually not quite the moment where the Doctor's talking to him, but it's a little later. So first he comes in, and he's super funny, and some of the amusement comes at his lines about sexism, and we'll get to that. I love the one line where he's like, "Oh, using your innate aptitude for nosiness and gossip."
Yes, I love that.
It's a great line. But then there is later when the Doctor is actually on trial. Well, she's being drowned, or she's about to be drowned,
right?
And he really does, like, Alan Cumming, his face in that moment, I thought was perfect, because he's clearly been affected by his conversation with the Doctor and what's happening, and he seems really uneasy, and is the fam comes up and gets them, tries to convince them to bring it up, and he even seems like, within the timing of the script, like trying to get her out before, relatively quickly. Like, I know in TV, its timing is like, he kind of like, he's not okay with it. And I got that loud and clear, and I thought that was a good moment. So I think it kind of has its cake and eats it too, right? Like, there's enough of both sides of it here that it again levels everything up with this great comedic performance from Alan Cumming. But then he is an experienced enough actor to know when to not do that. And
he can switch it. Yeah, I'm definitely not saying that he is at fault here, or that he acts comedy in those scenes that are supposed to be serious. I think he does switch. I think what it is, it's a bit of a whiplash for the audience, right?
Yeah.
Because we're sort of, so much is going on that we're kind of primed to reduce things to shorthand. And one of the things is, oh, this is comedy King James the First.
Yeah.
Right. So it feels like
Comedy
it just
football.
needs another scene, and maybe this is another reason to take the Morax out of it, right? Make it a
Make
pure
it a pure
historical.
historical. Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally
Yeah, and
with
you'd have more room for those kinds of scenes. We should also mention that he, in that first scene, he definitely takes a shine to Ryan,
you.
and we are led to understand that the shine is more than just, he likes to collect protectors.
We are, and this is a case where I'd love to go into the corner here with
Yes.
you. And how accurate is this? Is this a
It's
good read?
accurate.
Yeah.
It is accurate. James, actually, one of the reasons that he got into trouble as a king in Scotland and was almost assassinated for this was that he did have a lover who was a man. He was forced to then marry a Danish princess, which is actually interesting. It was a lot where he got his anti-witchcraft intelligence from was that it was a thing in Denmark. Where the queen that he married and had 3 kids with was from Denmark.
And didn't like the witches so much.
Didn't like the witches so
Got
well.
the
At least when he was in Denmark, and also when he was in Norway. Because interesting fact, like the queen sailed for the wedding. She sails from Denmark. She's supposed to hit Scotland. There's rough seas. She lands in Norway. The king goes over to Norway. Supposedly the most romantic thing he ever did in his life, to retrieve his queen from the rough North Sea. And so he goes over there as well. And I guess, that witchcraft is in the air as well in Norway. So he's like picking up a lot of this, the terminology and the interest in it. But yeah, he liked men as well as women. We know that for sure. We know that one of the things that his favorite was accused of was sort of being an older man, basically manipulating this young king, because he was as we know from the Witchfinders, like his mother, Mary Queen of Scots, was executed when he was very young. His father died in violent circumstances as a revenge killing.
Happens all the time in Doctor Who, man.
It really does. So he's like a great Doctor Who character for that reason. Perhaps the best reason to kind of introduce him as the first English king in Doctor Who. But so he had this terrible regency as a kid, and everyone was trying to manipulate him, and that's one of the the strikes against this favorite of his. But yeah, you can certainly believe that he would kind of then suppress that, as it were, that desire into a special love for his bodyguards.
Right. And then took a liking to, I think, what he calls a Nubian prince.
Oh, my Nubian prince, yes.
Yeah.
Ryan.
I
love how Ryan deals with that. Yeah, he turns him down at the end. There's a lovely scene at the end where he's like, well, Ryan, would you like to come back to London with me? And the TARDIS team is all like looking at Ryan, not like, well, would you like to come with us? It's like, dude, are you into this? Like, if you're into this, whatever, go with him. We're not going to judge. And Ryan lets him down very gently.
Yeah,
it's a lovely masterclass in like how to. Someone asks you out, you're not into them, just stick an eye brooch on them. Say, I got my eye on you.
Yep. Well, I think you made the right choice. So, in going back to the scene where King James sort of puts his sexism on full display to Jodie Whittaker, that's obviously a big sort of theme of the episode, where it's kind of like the first time that the Doctor being a woman isn't just relevant; it's like putting her in danger, and that she, obviously wouldn't be probably accused of her witchcraft. I mean, I guess maybe might have been with that sonic screwdriver. It becomes an issue, and certainly like because of the psychic paper, she's no longer the Witchfinder General in the King's eyes, just the Witchfinder's assistant, which it's kind of an interesting thing in terms of like how the psychic paper works, because that's not really helping.
I love the psychic paper in this. Is this our first encounter in Pull to Open history with the psychic paper?
No, we talked about it in the Idiot's Lantern.
Okay, he uses that,
Yeah.
That's right. He uses it as an inspector at the door of the dumb guy who's not beating up his daughter,
Yeah,
but
he's
just kind of being
another historical villain that's
Mm.
played for laughs is the father there. But how did you like how that worked in terms of like the weaving the Doctor's gender into this in a in a way that makes a point but is also relevant to the plot? I thought they pulled it off pretty well.
I agree, and I think that it's a very interesting choice to go to the one sort of area of history where everyone sort of knows witch trials, right? It's sort of a
Sure.
shorthand that if you've never studied history, you've still heard of the witch trials, right?
Well, it's
Maybe
like what you were just talking about earlier and how they just spread like wildfire. It's like, this is a good idea. Every society on Earth says virtually around the same time, even though there's no internet. It's like,
well,
kill the witches.
It does. So the Salem witch trials were what, 1692?
Oh, yeah. Well, I guess it took a while to get to the New World. So,
Yeah, 1692, 1693. The Pendle witch trials were 1612.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it did. It's instant in in 17th century terms, right? Things did take a while. You had to establish the colonies first, and then. But yeah, it was a very 17th century thing.
The people here in Lancashire are like, you guys are still doing witch trials? Come on, man.
Oh God!
So like 7 years ago.
Yeah, it's like wearing flared trousers. It's so over. But yeah, it's it's definitely a shorthand that we all know. So to drop the Doctor into that, especially after we've seen Rosa, which is the primary innovation of Rosa, is to say finally what should have been said all along, which is that companions of color are going to have a hard time in the past. It's just going to happen, especially with the Doctor's love for going into English history. That's going to happen. But what is also going to happen, and it's interesting that the Doctor hadn't thought about this, because she does... In Rosa, she makes a reference to, I'm still not used to being described as a woman, right? You would take a while to get used to that. But here we are going to the one area of history and the one situation in history where it would be most difficult to be a woman.
Yeah.
And it isn't necessarily... Okay, let's have another segment from the corner here, because I'm going to argue that we're looking at the wrong thing here. It's not about the witch trials. Witch trials, when you actually do it by the numbers, like, yes, it was, often used to shut women up, as the show says. It was a misogynistic tool.
Which is what Becca Savage is doing to some extent.
Yeah, but not nearly enough as the ducking stool was.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the ducking stool was used, outside of witch trials quite a lot.
Okay.
And definitely used disproportionately for women. For scolds, as women who spoke out were called quite often. It was previously called the cucking stool. Like ducking is a bit of a corruption. It was called the cucking stool because it... Okay. Pull to open, listeners, I hope you're not eating at the moment, but there was a hole in the bottom of the stool, which is why it was called the cucking stool, because there is a word that in Northern English that I knew growing up called cack, or cacking, as in cacking yourself, which comes from the Danish. It's basically, it's crap. It's the equivalent of crap, right? So it's the idea is you would sit on the stool and you'd be so afraid that you would defecate.
I see. Okay.
Yes, that is the origin of it, and it was all
I've never
over
wanted
the place.
to leave the history corner so much. But let's go ahead and finish the thought.
Yeah, so it does date back to the 13th or 14th century.
Yeah.
It goes back to way before the witch trials. The witchcraft, just to bring in James I for a second, part of the reason that the Pendle witch trials happened and that it was such a big thing was that, because James had written about witchcraft in this book, it was so the whole English legal system was trying to adapt to him. Mm-hmm. It's been like, okay, we're arresting witches now. Okay, I guess we'll, you have all these ambitious local officials saying, "Oh, I understand, Your Majesty.
What do we have? What do we have around that we could help King James here? Oh, the cucking stool. Let's do some adjustments there and use it for the witches. Great, awesome. Get to work.
Exactly. So it's using the tools that are already there. But also, interestingly enough, King James did attend witch trials himself, and none of the Pendle ones, I believe. But he also kind of had a bit of a come to Jesus moment, as it were. He kind of realized that there wasn't a lot of evidence being presented at these trials, and he would point that out himself, which I'm sure the local officials were like, make up your mind, dude. Are there witches or are there not witches? Just tell us.
Yeah. It's like when the CEO crashes your meeting. It says like one word about something. You're like, well, I guess we're doing that now. Okay, great.
Yeah, the CEO walks in, pops his head around the door, just goes witches, closes the door again. I was like, okay, guess we're arresting witches now.
We're doing now.
Okay.
Well, now that we've talked about the cucking stool, I think we're done with the corner.
Oh no! There's more to come out, but let's transition away from the corner.
We'll come back when we've cleaned it up a bit. But I gotta say, one of the things that struck me about this episode, I think it's a great episode for the fam in general, and I really like what's one of the best lines. And could almost be a tagline for the fam is it's a very flat team structure.
Yes, I love that line.
Graham and the Doctor. Definitely one of my favorite lines of the era. I could almost see that on a poster, it's a very flat team structure with the four of them. I think the script.
Speaking of things that the CEO might pop his head around the door and say.
Yeah, there you go.
He just pointed everyone in the conference room.
Especially what's
such a team structure.
It is. It's also such a modern line, right? Like, yes, this is historical, but it is like generally things are these days. More effective companies do have very flat team structures. So,
I love the way Jodie says it. Like it is her line, and the others say it, they pick it up, and that's part of the joke. But the way she says it, very flat team structure. It sounds so great in her voice.
Yeah. But in this case, like what Graham says is actually very true, and like everybody has like their own specialty, and they sort of each take on a role or a task here, and it's actually it's not just making busy work, that all sort of fitting with the character. Where Graham's sort of like by default, sort of the almost the father figure, especially when the Doctor is sort of depowered a bit by King James, and even says the line right, and so. It's almost like, in a sense, the man behind the woman.
Which is a role he played in Rosa as well, right? Yeah. He was like, I guess I'm your husband, like in the hotel room when the cop shows up.
Totally.
Yeah.
And then Yaz, I mean, like she's a cop, right? So it makes total sense. Like, okay, go off and investigate and find out what's really going on here. And she, Yaz is a good cop, not just because she has those skills, but she can connect with someone like Willa. And so that feels very natural, very good. Now, Ryan probably has sort of the least to do, so to speak, but with his sort of back and forth with the king, which again, I think is earned. I think that last scene where he invites him is earned. It's not out of nowhere because Ryan is sort of with him a lot. There's some exchanges and even though, and I think Tosin Cole actually does a good job.
He does
of bringing that to bear here in this. So, so it all really, you can tell at this point in the season, this is like episode 8. They're getting good at writing for this team. It's hard, right? Because this is like the biggest, hardest team we've had since the classic series. And
and we've seen a lot of those with the Turlo and we've had so many episodes with Turlo and Tegan and Nissa, or Adric and Tegan and Nissa, right? Yeah, it is.
You kind of have to. Someone always gets marginalized. It's just the nature. There's only so much time, but I think I think in this season, unfortunately, like there is like it does feel crowded sometimes. They don't do as well as they do here at having everyone do something and have that sort of naturally fit within the script and the character. So a lot of points to Witchfinders for just like not padding things and still making sure you're using your cast to the full potential.
And to your point, I think everyone in the fam has a specific role in the script, or comes to a great line in the script because of the roles that they're ascribed. We've talked about Ryan's role with the king, of like gently refuting the king, but also kind of talking through stuff with him. It's a great necessary foil in the script. Graham has that great line with Becca Savage where he's sort of like on the most basic moral level. This is what Graham is great for. He's kind of naive sometimes, but on the most basic moral level, he has unimpeachable arguments, right? And he there's that great moment where he's like, "Why are you drowning all these women?" You know, and she's like, "They're not good." And she's like, he's like, "How many of us are? Are you good? Are you good, Miss Savage?" And she cannot answer him.
Yeah.
She just sort of walks away like, you know, my conscience is clear.
Yeah.
Are you a good person? Like, that's a wonderful, wonderful Graham way of saying it, and really, really drives it home. And then Yaz's role is to basically talk about her experience of having been bullied as a kid, right? And that's a great scene where she tells Willa about that time that she was bullied, and it kind of cuts through to exactly why Willa is afraid of speaking out here. You know, why was something like this allowed to happen? Well, you know, both in the case of the witch trials and the ducking stool, it was because not enough people stood out. You know, a mob mentality was allowed to develop. If you don't speak up, then this sort of thing is going to happen. And if you don't speak up, it's because you're afraid of bullies.
Yeah, and it makes total sense that Yaz would have something that's resonant in her life. I mean, again, you get some good character development here. I mean, you get a little bit more depth into Yaz and her past, and probably why she became a cop, or at least part of the reason. And you know, it's all sort of played out here. Obviously, not as much going on for Yaz as in, say, Demons in the Punjab, but you know, they're still finding the nuggets, and they're coming out, and it's good. And that line from Graham, you're dead on. And honestly, I think he's the one person in the fam, even including the Doctor, who can really like give that line the most sort of gravitas and like really have it like he just, you know, Graham just is this kind of like the wise sort of grandpa, and you don't kind of don't want to disappoint him, you know, like I feel like although Whittaker could have the line, it's like there's a harder edge to it when it's sometimes it's coming from the Doctor. So in other words, like
the Doctor's less of an innocent, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, she wouldn't have quite the same reaction. She'd be more on their defensive. And I think Graham, just the way he is, you naturally kind of want to connect with him. And so, it works.
Yeah, it totally works. And I think that what do you think, by the way, about Graham's hat, the Witchfinder hat that gets passed around? It sort of feels like they're using it as a comedy item, but then he kind of ceremoniously gives it to the Doctor at the end, and it's like the Doctor is now the chief Witchfinder or something, right?
Yeah, I'm kind of a fan of hats as being sort of emblematic of things. You know, I mean, they are, and I think. This is a sort of device that has been used a few times where in various things, and the one that I always sort of think about because I saw it as a kid and it really stuck with me was a young Sherlock Holmes. So you kind of like there's a point in that movie where Holmes, as you know, he's like a teenager, he puts on the deerstalker. He looks like a goofball, like it's just like everyone's just shaking their heads like, dude, no, you never wear that. And at the end, it's like one of the last lines as he's pulling away in the carriage, he puts it on again, and just by, you know, it's probably not even the same hat in terms of the production, but he looks better. It looks more apt and more appropriate given everything that happened. And
interesting. Just to draw a Doctor Who connection, as we do with everything on Pull to Open, Stephen Moffat did the same thing with Sherlock, right? There's, well, not necessarily the same thing, because he puts on the Deerstalker in one episode for the press. Like there's a gaggle of photographers saying, "Hey, put this hat on, you'll look cool in it," and he does. So it's kind of reference there. But yeah, with this, I don't know. It just sort of. Do you watch What We Do in the Shadows?
No.
Great show. Highly recommended.
We talked about this before. I don't know.
Very funny. But there's a recurring witch's hat in that Matt Berry's character is just inexplicably enamored with this hat that brings incredibly bad luck. But he just thinks he looks really good in it. And it looks exactly like this hat. You know, it's the same shape as this hat that Graham and the Doctor are passing around. Which is the thing that... So we mentioned this with Battlefield, right? That it's sort of how much can you take a area of history that's been used so comprehensively as a figure of fun in so many things. And the Witch Trials. Well, specifically, I'm going to mention I'm wearing my Monty Python T-shirt today.
Oh,
the dead parrot, as a reference to the fact that you cannot possibly, if you've seen Monty Python and the Holy Grail, you cannot watch The Witchfinders without thinking of the sketch that I had to. It was the next thing I queued up on my YouTube. Right, was the "She's a witch, burn her" sketch in Holy
Right.
Grail, which, oh my god! I mean, it just like there's a ducking stool in that too. Like it's such a
Right.
part of TV culture, comedy culture, or movie culture, I guess. That scene, particularly, like the whole weird logic of it, right? What do we want witches to do? We want them to float. Why do they float? Because they're made of wood. That's sort of Terry Jones being that wonderful
Well,
sort of pseudoscientist there.
yeah, I think there's an inherent absurdity to witch trials, right? And they
Yeah.
say it multiple times in that, like, okay, you'll die if you're guilty, and you'll die if you're innocent, right? Like, so it's like, has no one like
Mm.
thought that through? Like, like, what do you? This is you're just killing people, So, as horrific as they are, there is this thing that is just so absurd and darkly absurd that you can make fun of it. It's
Mm.
also one of those things where there's such a distance where it's almost like in the air, so you could do it sort of both ways in terms of, like, obviously there's been serious depictions of witch trials before, horror depictions, and just thinking off the top of my head, the Blair Witch Project. You can do all that stuff,
That's true.
and so you could flip it, but I think there's a fascination with it when you have these just horrific crimes, and you just think, how did people think that way? And you kind of have this, like, well, let's depict it somehow to sort of try to understand it better.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you could do a number of different ways with it, but it is more okay to do comedy since there is such a distance from it now. Like, obviously, no one's went through this is alive, or
Yeah.
generations past. You couldn't really do the same thing with a modern day. Even the Holocaust, like, let's
Yeah.
not even go
Yeah.
there, right? You know what I mean? Like, it's but the further away you get from something, the more you can kind of do things with it.
I mean, the thing about that sketch, and that maybe the reason why it so resonated and is used in other circumstances now, is because it sort of stands in for mob mentality, right?
Yeah.
King mob, all of that, which is the thing. And it's definitely. I'm going to make another reference here and ask you: have you ever heard of a game called Werewolf?
A game called Werewolf.
Yeah, it's sort of
Like
there are different
a game.
versions of it.
Yeah.
It's also called Mafia. It's a game you play with a lot of people,
Okay.
often around a campfire, something like that. Where, like, in Werewolf, you are all villagers, but two of you are secretly werewolves.
Okay.
And night falls, and everyone closes their eyes. It's like a games master running this, and then the people who are werewolves open their eyes, point at someone. That person is dead. They're out of the game. And then everyone wakes up, and the villagers have to decide who they're going to hang as a werewolf. Right? So
can it be no one?
it can't be no one. You have to hang someone. That's the rules of the game. You have to hang someone every night. And the werewolves win if they are alive at the end of the game.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
So it is inherent on the werewolves to spread concern and doubt and paranoia, and to point a finger at their maybe their significant others who are playing the game, or like anyone they feel like they just want to kill off, or
it's
who
like
would be an
Us.
easy sell. Yeah.
That's how you used to do Among Us when you didn't have iPhones.
Yeah. I mean, it really is. I played games of Werewolf that reminded me very much of the Crucible, of that sort of sense of a rising mob mentality and, the desire for a scapegoat.
Well, The Thing, a very similar depiction,
Yep.
like one of my favorite all-time movies. Some of you must still be human.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you'd all just attack me, etc. So but you got to figure it out. You can't just go, okay, we'll be fine. No, the wolves will spread and kill everyone.
That's kind of the Cold War version, right? The Reds under the beds kind of phenomenon. Very much the same thing. But anyway, so this has been covered, and it's almost become a cliche. This idea of the mob mentality of burn the witch, burn her. And either you do it in an uber serious way, like the Crucible, famous Arthur Miller play, or you kind of do it comedy like Monty Python does. And again, the Witchfinders seems to want to have it both ways.
Right. And just but you thought that worked or that didn't work? Because I thought it worked, that it sort of has it both ways in that.
Yeah, I think it does.
Because it levels up the entertainment, gets you to, lean in, pay attention, delight in the things Alan Cumming's doing and what the fam is sort of doing to deal with this situation, which has its lighter moments. And
Yeah, I guess
you know,
I just take it back to like we need more if we're going to be switching in this whiplash way between comedy and extremely serious, as we do in the ducking stool scenes. Like it just needs more. We need a bit more time.
and it's telling, and sort of as we wrap up here, like we have not mentioned the Morax since the very beginning, and that
Exactly.
whole plot. It's really extraneous. I think where we're arriving is that they really should have made this a pure historical and just forgot about the alien plot and given us more there. Again, you might have like, I don't know, turned off some of the younger viewers who are waiting for an alien plot, but I think,
But also, some of the younger viewers might be able to sleep.
yeah. But I mean, do it one time. You know what I mean? Like, do a historical one time. Try it. I hope Russell Davies thinks about it. Like, I would love to see like a return to some kind of pure historical, because I think if they had followed through and done it here, I think it would have been really a tour de force. As such, it's kind of like, oh, it's a pretty good plot, and then kind of loses something once the alien mask comes off again.
Honestly, I'd be surprised if RTD does it. I think we may have missed our best chance.
Yeah,
I feel like Chibnall was the best chance for a pure historical that the show's had in a long time.
He's
and,
a fan of the corner, but Chris.
Yeah,
I'm sure he is. Chris, if you're listening, please leave a review. Let us know what you think of the History Corner. So listen, we cannot get out of this podcast without answering some questions.
Yes.
And those are, of course, the 4 questions to Doomsday.
Yes. Well, the first question, I feel like we've answered a fair amount of so far. Which is why did the randomizer take us here? Which, we've talked about the historical connection, the within the same season connection, getting a lot of Whittaker. What else do you think, Pete? What are the reasons?
Randomizer just knows us so well. It's like, you got to get your Whittaker fix before the centenary special. We got to get sort of back in the groove of like, what is Doctor Who right now? Again, we're not going to do the centenary special until it actually comes up in the randomizer.
Until we get number 302 in the randomizer.
But I think, the Rosa thing we mentioned of the peril of people of color with the Doctor in history, this being the Doctor in peril, because that connection came through loud and clear. So I think, that is the through line for me in the randomizer. Also, like, Whittaker stuff, maybe a little underrated, in that first season. I think maybe we've been lucky about going to the good ones, but I think we're getting more out of it this time. And, I think it probably Series 11 probably deserves a second look in the order we're doing it.
It is. I'm gonna say for a third time in these last 2 shows that I really want to watch Demons of the Punjab now. Yeah. It just sort of seems like the natural next step.
I'm a big
almost like make a trilogy.
I'm a big Kablam fan, so I would love to get there.
Kablamazon, yes,
but
yes.
If you take into account, like, that's 4 episodes that I think we're coming out like pretty solidly like in favor of, right? Like,
it's a solid run. Yeah. I think Whittaker is like, these are definitely better than we remember. I think now we're out of the fam phase. Yeah. I think we can look back on the fam and see the ways in which it worked, instead of maybe at the time we were a little focused on the ways in which they didn't.
And also a lot of missed opportunities, because a lot of this is spread so thin when you had these.
Yeah.
But I mean, these are good examples of, like I say, like bringing out the best of them, even if it is in nuggets.
They may be the best examples, and maybe sort of, again, we're kind of Monday morning quarterbacking here, but what if season 11 of the new show had just been entirely historical?
Oh, wow.
Because I would venture that the 3 strongest episodes are Rosa, Demons of the Punjab, and the Witchfinders. And they're all historical. So what if Chibnall had just leaned in to the historical? It seems to be a good TARDIS team for that specifically. So they all bring their own ideas and prejudices and responses to prejudices that would occur in time travel. So
in some universe, there's a Series 11 that is all historical all the time.
Season 11B.
right. The second question to Doomsday is, what if the evil plot had succeeded? So this requires us to identify the evil plot, and in this case, there's probably more than one. I feel like
Is it the Morax's plot or is
Yeah.
it King James's plot?
well, you could easily, do the Morax thing in 30 seconds because
Yeah.
it's just straightforward Doctor Who take over the world stuff, right? Like that's really boring. Like the Morax plot succeeds, they'll infect King James. James, with his influence, helps them conquer Earth and make it the center of whatever their prisoners or whatever this evil empire. History over, blah blah blah.
Does he though? Does he allow me to do a Thor gif? Does he though?
Does he?
Is it that? Is it?
James?
Is it really? Does he really take over? I don't know. I mean, first of all, remember James was so often on the edge of assassination. Now,
Right.
if he's Mud King,
Yeah. How do you
think-
assassinated, right?
was that?
He'd be resistant to assassination if he's taken over.
I
Unless they have
guess.
anti-Morax torches that the Doctor creates or whatever.
Yeah. Maybe they'll find remnants of the tree, which. The tree turning into you can chop up the tree and make torches out of it. Okay, I guess.
So maybe that just becomes some quest for someone to kill the malevolent King James. So it becomes like this Sauron, Lord of the Rings final battle with him, which is kind of a cool history, a new history of the 17th century. That'd be pretty awesome. But it'd be
I like that idea.
Alternate history.
But it would probably only take place in the UK, right? Again, how do you go from just having your mud infect a king to conquering the planet in the 17th century?
Well, presumably if they have some technology knowledge of some kind, you would think. I mean, they seem to have retained their memories, even though their doctor says at one point they were just DNA, which is weird.
I mean, in the spirit of season 11, I'm going to have to say that the Morax would have to use the power of prejudice, because the one thing that British people were more afraid of at this time, other than a mud king, was Catholics. If King James is on the throne and he's covered in mud now, and the mud is weird and it's sort of shifting and oozing all over his face, but at least he's not a Catholic. Let's go, and you can start a war of religion on that basis, because you've got to completely distract from his weird appearance. So I guess that's the evil plot. Does the Doctor die in this evil plot?
That's a good question.
I guess if King James's plot is the evil plot, then the Doctor probably dies. Because then it's that's succeeding. So the Doctor goes into the water as Jodie Whittaker and comes out as Ncuti Gatwa.
Oh wow! Yeah. The chains were a little too tight.
Yeah. Yeah, or maybe this is a alternate universe in which the wet weekend with Houdini never happened.
Right. Well, there you go. Then this might answer our next question to Doomsday, which is well, maybe we're getting ahead of ourselves, because we might want to consider another evil plot.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I was thinking
Becca's plot.
Yeah, it's essentially the plot of them succeeding in just being terrible witch trial people and killing the entire village, and just this, everything ends up with the king leading even harder into his anti-witch craziness. And then it's sort of a darker version of the 17th century, which would be bad for everybody.
Yeah. I mean, witch trials to that extent, it would be kind of interesting. It's the extent of wiping out a whole village, which I'm going to throw in one last couplet from History Corner on the cucking stool, because there was a joke in Poor Robin's Almanac in 1746, which said, "Now, if one cucking stool was for each scold, some towns, I fear, would not their numbers hold." Which is, immensely sexist joke, basically. Kind of, but also kind of saying, hey, if this were repeated, if you really literally did this for what you intended to use it for, maybe some towns wouldn't even exist.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happens here. The town is disbanded.
Yeah, it would be super tragic, but also obviously, but like I would just think like if the king, he seems to be, if not persuaded by the Doctor, at least like so his anti-witch crusade seems a bit mitigated by the end.
Yeah,
And if
for
that
sure.
doesn't happen, then it's you just have this dark cloud that gives us sort of an alternate history where just maybe progress doesn't even happen in quite the same way. Or at the
Well,
same
it seems like the Doctor has mitigated his belief in witchcraft, except for when the Doctor then takes off in a time machine in his face.
Yeah. Well, she did say, this is sufficiently advanced technology. Like you got, it's like that's just all it is.
Yeah, she brings in the Arthur C. Clarke reference, which is
Yeah.
great. We gotta love that. Isn't it also used in Battlefield? Isn't that another reason for the randomizer to bring us here? The Arthur C. Clarke quote.
Maybe I just remember that one never clarifying that how the magic works or if it really is magic.
Yeah,
That was one of the sort of weaknesses of it.
I believe they use the Arthur C. Clarke quote, which is interesting. Doctor Who kind of stealing from itself, right? But yeah. I mean, also, isn't it kind of a bit reckless to take a king that is kind of, we know that he believes in witchcraft. We know that Willa has sort of been accused of witchcraft.
Right.
The TARDIS takes off in his face. He's standing next to Willa. Are you absolutely sure he's not going to scapegoat her for this weird witchcraftiness?
Yeah, just think
like he's literally just done it.
Like that he was completely fooled by a bunch of witches, and now it's like, all right. Well, this is also like I guess one of the issues I had with the story in that there's not enough clarity on like which side people are considering other people. Like when, for example, the Doctor's accused of witchcraft, obviously, like why isn't the fam immediately rounded up and then like executed, right? Like isn't there sort of a guilt by association there? I felt like there's a bit of a few too many plot contrivances that way where you're not sure how much peril the fam's in because the sides they're on, whether they're in the King's good graces or Becca Savage's ally or not, don't really seem to matter that much. They're still free and able to do things. Whereas I feel like if there really was this flip-flopping of allegiances, that would have affected their ability to do things and have some physical consequences beyond, they do obviously do it with the Doctor, but
limited budget. They could only afford one scapegoat.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. So anyway.
But also it's that kind of thing with mob mentality as well, right? You just need the one.
It might explain a little bit this problem if we can figure out where the Clara splinter is, which is
right. Our third question
to Doomsday. And you talked about the Doctor maybe not escaping and regenerating to Shurigatwa. Maybe that doesn't happen because she loosens the chains a little bit. Maybe
Clara's under there with a scuba mask.
Perhaps.
Perhaps she's the one who sets the Doctor up with Houdini.
That's a good one.
For this wet weekend. You can imagine Clara being on that too. And we don't know which regeneration this wet weekend takes place in, right? So it could have easily been a Capaldi era. It could actually not be the Clara Splinter, but Clara herself, the Impossible Girl herself, arranging this Houdini weekend that we've never seen.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah, she's out there making sure all the pieces are in place.
Speaking of pieces, maybe she's the one who kind of spreads the idea that, maybe you could use that tree, chop it into pieces and light the end of it. And that's how you can get rid of the Morax.
Yeah, that's better than a hello, sweetie, for sure, to bring the Doctor running. Yeah, that's good. All I want to know is that she's not one of those other zombies, because that would just not a good look for Clara.
Yeah. Although, don't you kind of want to see Jenna Coleman in that kind of scary grey makeup?
Let's have her be the lead one.
Yeah. Sure. Exactly.
All right.
She makes a good witch.
At the end of the day, what is this episode? Is it a Dalek, an Ogron, or a Viscount banger? Our rating system. Dalek,
right?
Good. Ogron, not so good. And the Viscount banger kind of explains itself.
This is, yes. I feel like a royal episode should have a Viscount banger, but no, we had the Viscount. I decided that last week that, to my mind, Rosa was a Viscount banger.
You've been giving him away, man.
I've been I gave it
That's
to
all good.
Logopolis, which is not necessarily, which
Oh, we
this
did.
is
We
all
both did.
subjective. Yeah. But that was the last one before. So I still
No,
feel
no,
I'm
you
being
did Carnival of
sparing.
Monsters. Don't retcon your own
And
history.
Carnival Monsters, thank you. You're right. Definite Viscount banger. Yeah, but still, I feel like I'm being sparing, and for that reason, I'm not going to give a Viscount banger to the Witchfinders.
Yeah.
I'm going to say it's a Dalek. What about
Yeah,
you?
it's a very competent Dalek. I think this
Yeah.
is a very good. This is a Dalek that's very good at knowing what it's trying to do, and it just doesn't waste time. You know, screaming exterminate before it actually does the exterminate. It just gets right to it, which is good. It's
I
also
would love to
creepy.
see a version of Witchfinders set in a village full of Daleks, where they're just all screaming, "Burn her! Burn her! Burn her!"
Well, there were those religious Daleks in the new series for 5 seconds, so that would be a good opportunity. I got to say, like I say, I watch all these episodes with my kids. I try to anyway. My son really liked this one. At the end of the episode, when he finished, he's like, "Wow, I really like that." He said he thought it just really was good at holding his attention. That the morality presented, like the dilemma, that he liked that it wasn't just like evildoers and good guys. That there were issues with sort of the quote unquote establishment of of the village and King James, and just really got him to think about that perspective.
That's great.
And he also just thought the performances were really awesome. Like he was just super excited to tell me how much he liked it after he finished.
So would Jack give it a Viscount banger?
I don't know if he'd do that, but I think he would. I'll have to check. He listens to these, so I'm sure he'll let me know before next week.
I love it. I think we should, if they're willing, if the kids would like to include their ratings, I think it would be a great one. Could help resolve any ties that we have between us.
Pretty sure my daughter wouldn't, just because she was scared. She was scared by it.
Yeah.
It was good of her to watch it with us.
She's okay now. She's over the Morlocks, or
she's all right. It was one night. It was one night.
Yeah.
It's all good.
Morax. You can't even remember their names.
All right. We are moving on.
We are.
Witchfinders and its slimy, muddy tendrils. And getting back in our time space vessel to find out where we're going next in this thing we call Doctor Who, the TV series, which means we activate the randomizer.
That's right. It's time for the randomizer. Randomizer, 2 components. Pete is looking at the Codex, which is our list of 301, not yet 302 Star Wars stories. Holy crap. Wrong podcast. Sorry, people.
All good. Wait a minute. You're not cheating on us with another randomizer, are you?
There's a whole other podcast. I'm sorry to have to tell you this way, Pete.
No.
We go through random episodes of like the Clone Wars and
how long is that spreadsheet?
Yeah, seriously.
Special on there?
The holiday special. Yeah, exactly. Oh God. Anyway, no, the Codex is the random list of Doctor Who stories. And then we navigate through the Codex with a truly random device that is called random.org. Device, by the way, in the Pendle Witch Trials, it was basically 2 families at each other's throats. One was the Device family.
Wow.
And one was the Nutter family. If you've seen Good Omens, the Neil Gaiman, Terry Pratchett, or if you've read the book, you know that that continues the witch families of Device and Nutter up until the present day. So,
wow. True fact, I used to be the editor of a site called Device.
Oh.
Yeah. It was
interesting.
With no E, because you had to misspell everything back in those days.
Yes.
It's the only way to get the URL.
A miracle of rare device.
Well, those witch trials had, reverberation. This is why the randomizer took us here. Clearly, I mean,
I was just joking after watching the Witchfinders with my wife that it would be a great name for a technology reporter if you had like a hyphenated name that's like both of those families together. Device Nutter. I'm just a device nutter, me.
Nobody grab that URL. I want it. All right.
Devicenutter.com. It's a very aggressive technology site. Yes, right. Random.org is our random element. It uses atmospheric noise rather than pseudo-random algorithms which computers are very, very known to do and are bad at doing. But this is so much more doctorish. We love it. It's been scaring us for years at this point. And Pete, do we want to issue a challenge to the randomizer before I give us a random number between 1 and 301?
We probably do. And I'll just go it. I'll say it. Let's give us a pure historical. Do it.
Wow.
It could be anything, including Black Orchid.
I'm gonna double down. But since the randomizer gave us the closest it could find to a King Charles story, literally the closest possible thing, I'm gonna go with confidence and say, give us Demons of the Punjab.
Whoa! Look at you! You're playing roulette with the randomizer.
That's right.
That's not how it works.
All my chips on one number.
What? Well, we got to get some. Maybe you win a prize if this actually happens.
Yes. Can we just make Pull to Open like a gambling podcast at the same time? Can we do this? Is it legal?
I think so. Okay.
You're in the state of New Jersey, and I hear that everything is legal in New Jersey. So probably
except
we can
pumping
do
your own gas. You can't do it.
But we can do gambling, so write in, listeners, if you would like to see an actual Pull to Open book on the chances of various options. But yeah, Demons of the Punjab, do it. Okay. Do it and be a legend.
Let's find out if this is going to happen. You ready with the Executor?
I am ready with the Executor. Random.org is ready to go when you give me a countdown.
I will give you a countdown in 5 Rels. 4, 3, 2, 1.
Affirmative.
41.
Whoa, it might have done it. It might have done it. No, Fury from the Deep.
Oh!
What?
A very, very wet episode of Doctor Who.
Look at that. Is that one was... There's an animated version of this, right? I'm not wrong about that, right?
I don't know. It's completely missing, it says here. Has there been...
you go. There is. There's an animated version.
There is?
Yeah, it was
thank goodness.
2020.
2020. Oh, we were so close to our first completely missing story.
Yeah.
Which is something we've asked the randomizer for in the past.
Yeah. So it was missing and kind of technically still is, but they've animated it to the audios that were preserved. So wow, okay, this is huge. This is
to Troughton.
Not a pure historical.
Not a pure historical. It is a 6-episode one, though. So
wow, you got your TLDW cut out for you next week, sir.
Yeah, but also 3 minutes for it. So yay.
Well, and if there's a lot of running down corridors, or I guess in this case, offshore platforms. I don't know.
North Sea oil rigs. Yes.
So, okay. Free from the Deep coming up. More Jamie, more Troughton. I guess the randomizer got a taste back in the Two Doctors and is like, let's do more of that.
Yeah, and there's a Target novelization. Maybe we'll dip into that.
Lots of things, lots of resources. Well, we got this one. We got it.
Oh, there's also Tom Baker narrating an audio cassette version from 1993.
Wow.
See if we can track that down.
You order that.
See if I can find that on the dark web.
Maybe, if someone out there just wants to send us it, that's fine too. But whether you have a copy of Fear of the Deep or not, we love to thank you for listening here to Pull to Open the podcast. It is right. We are a podcast. It is a thing you subscribe to. So if you haven't yet, please do in whatever app you like. We're on all the good apps. We're on Overcast. We're on Spotify. We're on, obviously, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Breaker, everything. Pretty much anywhere you want to find podcasts, we're there. Subscribe to us. Leave a review if you can. Follow us on social. We're at Pull to Open on TikTok. We're uploading videos, snippets of the show there all the time. And we're active on Twitter and Instagram at Pull to Open 63. We will see you next time for Fury from the Deep.
Yes, get furious, people, and get deep, because that's what we're going to do. We'll see you then.
Talk soon. Bye-bye.